Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of Mayfair Witches. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So really quickly, let's talk about the potential, once again, the potential ancestry of the Mayfair Witches, because obviously we got a little bit more in-depth in some of the, at least specifically, it seemed like it was like Rowan's lineage, but it might just be Mayfair Witches in general, because we got obviously her mom Deidre, but there was also Deidre's mom was a portrait up there, and it went back maybe 300 years. I think it's just, I don't know if it's, I wouldn't even go as far as saying I don't think it's like a 100% a direct. Well, it might be because it's a designee thing that's passed down from mother to daughter, so on and so forth. So that's why everything kind of goes to Rowan. But the furthest it goes back into a woman named Deborah, which is interesting because the past stuff has us focusing on, I think her name's Suzanne. Now, I don't know if, like, Suzanne ended up changing her name to Deborah, like, maybe when she, left, kind of, as they would say, like, left the old country behind and came to maybe, like, what would eventually become the U.S. Maybe that's what ended up happening, and she ended up changing her name to Deborah. So I wish I'd focused more so on that picture, because it might not be. Maybe it's Suzanne's daughter, whose name is Deborah, who ended up being the full beginning of, like, the Mayfair Witches bloodline. Because Suzanne is, like, obviously crying tears because, obviously her mom died last episode. Obviously the parallels between, her mom's funeral was this episode, along with Deidre's funeral was this episode. So that's an interesting parallel. But I didn't even think about that last episode. But Suzanne got brought by, like, others who I guess are more, like, in that Wiccan vein, who are like, don't shed your tears here, because the priest or whatever overseeing her, it's like, hey, don't cry, your mother's in heaven now or something. But the other lady was like, save your tears, and there was more kind of an effigy that they made kind of representing her, and it's just like, right here, you get to dance and kind of shoot out all your sadness. So that was interesting. And then we have Rowan dreaming about, like, her and Cyprian hooking up, and I was like, whoa, is this a byproduct of him, like, touching you? Because I was thinking, like, right, more than just memories got exchanged, like, maybe some, like, some emotions got exchanged as well, until, like, we saw the necklace. I was like, okay, it's Lasher. It's like, yeah, it was him messing with her, because, like, right, because this is someone she was able to get close to in a way like no one else has been. I mean, he's able to literally see all these memories. It's like, yeah, I kind of overshared. Like, you got to see all this stuff with me, and she's like, I know nothing about you. She's like, oh, so you're into the Astros games and this and that. And it's interesting, and I think that's such a fascinating thing, because his gift revolves around memories. All of his items are stuff that his sister got him that are tied to good memories. Not necessarily her memories, but other people's memories. So he kind of keeps them as almost like a nice, like, because it almost feels like I'm curious, could it be an interesting, complicated thing where it's like, this is going to go into, like, the Marvel realm, that there's some versions of Taskmaster that I didn't know this. Maybe it's a very specific run of Taskmaster where Taskmaster can remember everything that they, like, all the moves and fighting styles of other people, but it takes up space in Taskmaster's memory, so Taskmaster forgets the more that he learned stuff. So what if that's the case with Cyprian? He kind of implies, like, his past isn't worth remembering. I think that's why he kind of drowns himself in other people's good memories, because his life was so complicated in some regards. Like, my memories aren't that good. But part of me was wondering, like, is it just easier to digest other people's memories? Which almost feels like that could easily turn into a little bit of an addiction, if it isn't already one. Like, I mean, Rowan focused on a few items, but who's to say every single item in his house isn't like that? They didn't really go into it, but that just seemed interesting. That's like, just these few objects. It's like, could be a lot of stuff in that house that's very much like that. So, but yes, we also cut back to Carlotta, who they ended up, because I was wondering, like, what was the woman who was looking after Deidre? Her name was like Delphine or something like that. And I was wondering, like, obviously it's like, okay, she's bashing her head against the wall. I'm like, what are you going to do when she eventually dies? I guess this episode, when Carlotta went looking for the necklace off of her dead body, it was like, okay, so it was always meant to be a temporary solution. You were always just going to find, well, maybe they just didn't realize, like, oh, you were just going to kill her that quickly. We knew you'd be upset, but at least you're bound to her. But Lasher ended up killing her, and now it's like maybe they always anticipated it as like, okay, we're just going to have to find another person to bind him to. But by the time they went back down there, the necklace was gone. It's like, how'd you manage that? I guess maybe Lasher, because he's already made contact with Rowan, has more of a foothold in this world, and he was able to make that happen. Or he sent someone there on his behalf. It's like, well, who would be able to get in without Carlotta knowing? So it had to potentially be someone on the staff that he, like, took possession of or something. Like, once again, we don't know the full capabilities of what he can do and what he's limited in what he can do, since he doesn't have a full grasp in this world unless it's specifically tied to the women that he's tied to, specifically Rowan's family in particular. It seems like it's their bloodline, that because like every designee apparently like had that necklace. So that's why I'm like, yeah, they're all Mayfair related people, designees, but they are the very specific direct bloodline that has always had this connection to Lasher. Because apparently he tried to reach out to Carlotta when she was younger, but Carlotta's like, no, I pushed him away. Now, I think that might just deal with the fact is that, like, Deidre, like, they're all people who are missing something that Lasher's kind of feeling. Like, I think he finds people who has something missing in him, like any cult leader would. I think in the same regards, he's a tempter. It's like this snake in the garden. He's the devil, essentially. That's the whole thing that they're going for with him. Once again, the person, many faces and forms, right? So part of me wonders, could it be that, like almost like a cult leader, he's finding weaknesses in you that he can take advantage of, something that's missing inside of you. He can kind of fill that void with himself until he kind of becomes your everything. And Carlotta in particular is very religious, so it could be that her mom kind of whipped that into her, which I am wondering how that works in conjunction with being in a family of witches, which once again, not everyone has like that witch gift. Like, once again, Cyprian brought it up last episode that like Carlotta doesn't have it. We don't know if her other sister has abilities or not, but we know Cortland doesn't either. So, I mean, how many of their children end up having gifts? Like, was it Josephine? Or was it Sophie? I think it was Josephine. Like, does she have any abilities? I can't remember. Was it Josephine or was it Josephina? It might have been just Josephine. Cortland's daughter. So I don't know. We really hadn't really gotten into that, but this episode was that opportunity for Rowan to get introduced to the rest of her family. I mean, when she shows up at kind of the wake and everyone there is just kind of like staring at her. I mean, to be fair, she's like, yeah, everyone's looking at me like I'm a ghost. Now I know why, because everyone thought I was dead. It's just like, oh my God, is that her? No, it can't be her, can it? Cortland is, he put like a little handkerchief right there over Deidre's neck just so it could hide like her scars from like when her throat was slit. But in that moment, he was just kind of like, right, don't you look better? And then he ends up taking some of her hair. So it seems like such a weird thing he has with Deidre, where it's like, right, you probably not willingly, but you kind of are, you side with Lasher in all of this. Once again, that's what felt like you set Deidre up with the whole Lasher thing. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you're like Lasher coming to visit you is something that happened after the fact, because Cortland still hooked Deidre up with that very specific guy, and he wanted to make it seem like, oh, the guy's like, oh, I like you, and let's have fun. Like, it seemed like that was a setup. So, and I love that this episode does create doubt of like, right, who do you trust in this family? Because it seems like everyone has their angle at something. Carlotta, in her own twisted way, she is trying to protect Rowan, and in her own twisted way, she thought she was protecting Deidre as well. Because I think for her, she felt like Deidre was so much of a lost cause that it's like, right, Lasher, we have to stop him. There's no other way. Well, he has to be bound to a body, so let's drug and sedate Deidre, because it's the only way to save her soul and save Rowan's soul from Lasher getting access to her. So, oh, we also saw at the kind of actual funeral where like there's a headstone for like the Mayfair family, and we saw that guy taking photos. I was like, who is it? It's the guy that Cyprian ran into last episode, the guy who was actually doing Deidre's the medical examiner who was doing her autopsy. That guy, when Cyprian was like, yeah, the Mayfairs, they're witches, so he's going to be an issue. Once again, he made it seem like, hey, we're having a gathering, so once again, I don't know whether it's going to be like a witch hunter thing, or whether just people trying to expose that family's a family of witches, which is definitely going to be interesting. Once again, he's only in that, like, he pops up for like 3 seconds at most, and then like that's all we get of him in this episode. So I figured the way they were setting that up, that seemed too important, the way he was inviting Cyprian. So, which the group that Cyprian works for ended up finding the guy who killed Deidre, but he's acting all weird and twitchy, and they're like, right, could he just be on drugs or something? But it's like, no, there's something more here. So the guy, I think his name is Albrecht, was like, I want you to read him cold, which I'm like, that actor plays Albrecht. I'm like, I've seen you in stuff before. There's also a lady, there was that black lady who was talking to, Rowan. I'm like, that actress, I'm like, I know her from something and I just can't place it. I was like, oh my God, I definitely know her from something. I just don't remember what it was that I know her from. But either way, Cyprian ended up reading the guy, and it turns out, hey, he is the one that killed Deidre, but the thing was, he was hired to do it. But then all of a sudden, like the guy's twitching and stuff like that. I don't know if was that entirely Lasher screwing with him and just needed confirmation, and then he finally snaps the breaks the dude's neck and leaves. So the question is, was that him like possessing the guy's body the entire time? Because the question was like, right, was there some outside force making him do it? It's like, no, he was just a hired hitman, nothing supernatural related to him. But Cyprian goes back to the point that he read the memories of the elevator a couple hours later, and they were cleaned. So there does seem to be a supernatural element to this. Like someone connected to this hid memories. Because I don't know whether they, maybe they were in the elevator with Deidre at one point in time themselves, or maybe they themselves were in the elevator at one point in time. Because it did seem like, and that was even kind of what Cyprian was asking. It's like, did Lasher do that just to get revenge for what happened to Deidre? Was there something else there? It might have just been because he did love her. Like at her funeral, all those like flowers came in at the wake. Like all those flowers came into the church, and Carlotta's trying to pick them out of Deidre's casket. So I'm assuming those were Lasher. That was kind of his love language of sorts, him being like, oh, goodbye, my love. Once again, it kind of rains a little hollow when you've immediately moved on to her daughter. Once again, that predatory, creepy thing he has with the family, super jacked up. But getting back to the Mayfairs, you had Rowan go to, the house, and Carlotta was so happy to have her there. Once again, there's all those different people. It was a very small event where, she did say like none of the family was supposed to be there, but it was very specific people she made a point not to include. That was like Cortland and his group, like specifically him and his daughter. But like obviously Rowan learns a little bit more about the family, and Carlotta ended up telling her like the truth of like, hey, your mom was sick, and she didn't kind of like, right, she thought she was doing what was best for you, which is a complete another lie. Because also Rowan knows you're lying, because Cyprian told her like, no, I felt your mom's memories. It was the strongest memory. It's like you were taken from her unwillingly. She didn't give you away willingly. So she already going into it knowing like, hey, you're a liar. And then Carlotta's saying like, hey, you need to be careful around other people in this family because they are liars. They'll trick you into believing that Lasher is a gift. He's not. So, and then Cortland later on was like, oh yeah, you have all those gifts. I thought he was just talking about her powers. And she's like, you're talking about him? And he's like, she said that you would say he was a gift. And it's like, well, what is he? And it's like, well, you can always ask him yourself, because Cortland saying like, he's not as bad as you think he is, or whatever. Like that, you don't serve him, he serves you. And I'm like, I don't know if this relationship with Lasher is that, especially it seems very one-sided considering the fact that he apparently goes after you at a very, very young age, you know? So that's what makes the situation creepy, weird, and twisted. So obviously a lot of the beef between Cortland and his sister Carlotta. Once again, he says his sisters, but we haven't really, the only other person we really seen interact with Carlotta is the other sister. And part of me wonders, like, are we going to find out that other sister's actually dead and Carlotta's the only one that sees her type of thing? I don't know. I just think that's so... I mean, maybe she was in other scenes and I didn't see it, but she didn't even have any interactions with her brother. The only people who had interactions, like, with amongst the siblings was Carlotta and Cortland and not the other siblings. So I just think that's so interesting. Like, once again, that makes me think, like, are we going to do, like, a Shyamalan twist of a Sixth Sense type of thing with Carlotta's sibling? I don't know. Once again, I'm probably reading too much into it. Maybe she was in other scenes and I just wasn't paying as much attention, but it feels like Carlotta was like at the centerfold, or not unless the other sibling's kind of agoraphobe who doesn't like, I mean, for one, doesn't like being around other people, but might just like not like being out in public too, so that might be element to it too. Just, you know, throwing that out there. Rowan just doesn't know who to trust because it's like, yes, quite the complicated circumstances to meet the rest of your family, but also have your family be like, well, this person, you shouldn't trust him. Well, you shouldn't trust this person either. Well, this person lied and said that you were dead the entire time. And hey, I, you know, ended up losing this house to my sisters who kicked me out. Just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I let them have it because they didn't have anything else. Because he's always been the business savvy person, so it's always worked out in his end, so he's kind of well off, whereas his sisters aren't. It's like, I feel pity for them. So, and because the house actually belonged to Deidre, it always did, and now that she's gone, it all passes, along with a lot of other assets, passed to Rowan. Now the question is, Rowan's not sure whether she wants it or not, so I don't know whether Cortland wants to push her to take it, just because it'll be easier for Lasher to get to her, or what. Because even Josephine was like, right, why are we just leaving? Like, why are we giving up and just leaving her here alone with Carlotta? And it's like, because, like, no matter what, even if she's here with Carlotta, he's here now too, and that he's going to be able to handle things on his own. So later on, when Rowan is going searching, she ends up finding, I think, her mom's room, and she ends up finding the necklace. She also got pictures of Ellie, and we find out, like, what Ellie's connection is to the Mayfair. She is a Mayfair. She's a cousin of theirs. So, and it's like, yeah, she kept it secret that you were alive to the rest of the family because I asked her to. So, because once again, from Carlotta's perspective, she's doing God's work. Once again, how that works, once again, being a part of a family connected to witches that are witches, like how you feel in that regard to the Lord feels interesting to me. I'm wondering, like, maybe because she doesn't have powers, that's when she had to kind of lean into the Lord, because she doesn't have that connection like those with the gifts do. Because once again, it seems like it's innate in the Mayfairs to be connected to their mothers and their mother's mother, and it all kind of going back to like almost like Mother Gaia, you know, Earth. So maybe just certain members of the Mayfair family, those without gifts, don't have that connection. So maybe that's why they kind of find, whereas Cortland found his position and role and power in like money and like owning stuff and kind of building an empire for himself, whereas maybe Carlotta dived deeper into religion and kind of held on to that. But the moment she saw Rowan pick up the necklace, because she was drawn to it, she saw it in her dream and couldn't shake it. Because I guess it's like, right, he technically already got to her last episode when she was kind of having that like high fever dream or whatever. I think he'd already essentially sunk his teeth into her then, and now all he needed was the final touch of her putting the necklace on. And I thought Carlotta was going to go through the whole thing of like, cool, I'm a poison you and basically put you in the same position as Deidre. It's like, no, I'm gonna burn this house down with you inside, and I'll die along with you, just because, like, right, she never killed Deidre, she just like locked her up, and maybe in her mind it's like, right, I have to pay because I prayed to Rowan, prayed to Deidre, prayed to her mother, prayed to her mother's mother, because I can't believe I have to do this, but it's for the greater good. So, seeming like kind of a religious fanatic doing what she believes to be her calling to take this, to end this darkness once and for all by killing Rowan. And I mean, Rowan has her powers and she's still figuring them out, obviously. I was thinking she was going to end up killing Carlotta, but she didn't. So that was interesting. Luckily, Cyprian ended up showing up in time, but got stabbed in the process. But before they could end up leaving, Lasher shows up being like, "Oh, she's already mine," and closes the doors. Now, getting a little sneak preview of the next episode, you're like, okay, is that going to how is the whole house being on fire thing going to be resolved? Is Lasher just going to take it out and trap them all in it, or is Carlotta and Cyprian going to get kicked out, or is it going to be a thing of Lasher's going to try and break her will by making her more so his, but it's all happening in a span of a second inside of her head type of thing? Just because the next episode, just a glimpse I saw of it, once again, I don't like watching previews, but it's just sometimes that preview next episode comes up so quickly that I'm I end up catching a couple seconds of it, but it seemed like it was her, Rowan stuck inside the house. I'm like, so the house isn't on fire anymore. So how, I'm curious. So next episode, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where next episode ends up taking us with all of this. Probably get a better understanding of Lasher and what he really wants. Once again, what happened to Cyprian, once again, got super stabbed. And what happened to Carlotta, we'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.